Thank you, everyone. This is our historical happy hour. Today, we'll be looking at books in our historical medical library on medical astrology. On a personal note, this is a talk I've been wanting to do because I thought it'd just be a really fun topic. I'm a big astrology nerd myself, so yeah. Also, drop in the chat your zodiac sign, as it'll become relevant later, and can take a look at all the different stuff in our collection on that. But today we have Candace. Thank you, Candace, for being here. Talk about the different books in our collection. And I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is my first time doing a historical happy hour here with the College of Physicians. So I'm one of the librarians at the Historical Medical Library. Tonight, I'm going to make my own kind of spin-off of a Tom Collins. I believe you've been shared the recipe. It is a gin-based drink. Please drop in the chat your own beverages that you're working with today. Even if it's water, it's good to stay hydrated. So I'm just going to fill this fancy glass that I got that's kind of themed for the evening tonight. I'm going to fill that with ice. Here, one more here. All right, so I've got my glassware filled with ice. I'm going to add 3 ounces of some sparkling water. 2 ounces of some sparkling water. There we go. I want to say this is like a 6-ounce glass, so we're already about halfway there. It's just a little simple drink. So next up is the gin that I'm going to use today, and it's Empress 1908 Indigo Gin. And this gin gets its beautiful color. I know my picture isn't perfect because I've got this moonlit background today, but it's made with butterfly pea flower. And so that's why it's got this pretty purple color. And so I'm going to take a little over an ounce of that gin and float it into the drink here. And I'm not going to pour all of it because I want to save a little for the last step. Now comes the fun part. We're going to do some alchemy. Although this is a talk on medical astrology tonight, the Historical Medical Library has been collecting books for over 200 years, and we've kind of grouped in those type of sciences together on the shelves. Things like alchemy, studies of the occults, magic, astrology, and the like. So I thought we'd do a little alchemy. So with this gin having butterfly pea flower, I'm going to take what is equal parts lemon juice and simple syrup and go ahead and pour that on top. And you'll see the drink turns pink. And so that's just the change in the pH balance, causing the increase in acidity to change the color to react with the butterfly pea flower. Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? And then for our garnish, got a little simple lemon wedge here and some thyme. You'll put that right in there to make it all fancy. We'll get that on this side. Yes, rose quartz is a Libra gemstone, right? So we're in that season. And my little bit at the end here, I like to just pour it on top. And then there's like a nice little gradient for purple, pink, and then yellow at the bottom. I do encourage you, however, once you got your straw on here, to stir your glass. Otherwise, you're going to get to the bottom and all of that gin is going to be there. So highly recommend a stir. Again, it is a Tom Collins. It's just my own little version that I thought would be great for this talk. So I'm glad everybody appreciates it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start my little slideshow here. So again, my name is Candace. I am one of the special collections librarians with the Historical Medical Library at the College of Physicians of Philadelphia. Thank you again all for coming. As it is Indigenous Peoples Day, I personally would like to take a moment and recognize that the land now known as Philadelphia was home to and cared for by the Lenni Lenape people, the original stewards of these lands. So to get us started, I wanted to give us all a little background on the Historical Medical Library. Established in 1788, the year after the College of Physicians was founded, the Historical Medical Library was Philadelphia's central medical library for over 150 years. And we served medical students, hospitals, physicians, medical schools, and other health professionals during that time. Today, we are an independent library dedicated to the history of medicine and the medical humanities, serving hundreds of scholars, health professionals, students, and popular writers each year with their research using our collections. And really anyone can do research at our library. If you reach out to library@collegeofphysicians.org, you can put in a reference request. Our reference librarian can help you out, navigate what you're looking for, and if it's something that we have in our collections that would help you out with any of your work. So these photos actually come from our library's social media accounts. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. The handle is CPP HistMedLib for College of Physicians of Philadelphia Historical Medical Library. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but please do give us a follow. The image on the left shows the construction of our 1950s stacks extension. Our original stacks from 1908 run behind the main building of the college, and this extension from 1950 is what you see as that giant brick wall from the Benjamin Rush Garden. The center image is the Ashurst reading room on the second floor. Originally, this would have been where someone would come to work with and study our books. And then on the right is our Norris reading room. Here's where our library work is currently done, where we house researchers, and where you can see library exhibitions. And we recently opened our new library exhibition, Illustrating Medicine, just a couple weeks ago. And you can see it with your admission to the Mutter Museum on the weekends between 10 and 5. So this image on the right, the Norris Reading Room, was originally our periodical room where the latest medical publications like journals and national and foreign dissertations were out for students and doctors alike to study. Our stacks are 7 floors high and contain all of our library and archival collections, almost all of them, I should say. And we're nationally known as one of the largest history of medicine collections in the United States. We house a variety of materials from our 235 years of existence, including journals, medical dissertations, books, photographs, manuscripts, and medical pamphlets and other ephemera. All that is to say that our collections are vast, and so too are our materials on a variety of subject matter related to the history of medicine, including medical astrology. So the field of medical astrology drastically advanced and developed in both scope and complexity through the Renaissance era of early modern Europe, spanning roughly between the 14th and 16th centuries. By no means a fringe study, by the 1500s, educational publications on medical astrology were widely available and used by medical practitioners at all levels of practice as resources and guides in their work. This popularity of the discipline during this time period is reflected in the numerous publications here at the library and has on the subject from the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries. Stacked here are some of the works I will be talking about today. The text you see to the right of each book is actually its call number. The bottom call number that's really long is actually a Library of Congress cataloging system. We also use the National Library of Medicine, while the others are an internal cataloging system that was developed in-house in the library, and it has numbers and letters that correspond to the different subjects that we have in our collections. So these books represent only a small portion of library materials that could be looped into the discussion today. Like I mentioned when I was making a drink, we've collected for over 200 years, so there's works in this same library section on the occult, alchemy, sorcery, witchcraft, chiromancy, which is palm reading, and more, producing dozens of work in our collections. But with only an hour, I'm going to try and focus strictly on works that were used to teach astrology and medical astrology to its reader. Today, one could say that just like the Renaissance era of Europe, astrology has permeated all facets of pop culture. Just decades ago, one could read their weekly horoscope in the Sunday paper, and now we can find all forms of media like memes, podcasts, and social media accounts related to astrological readings and the characteristics of people's zodiac signs. When it comes to our library's holdings, these books and materials were meant for students and practitioners of medicine to teach, educate, and advance the field of medicine through the study and practice of astrology. So one cannot practice astrology without a fundamental understanding of astronomy, mathematics, art, and the natural sciences, as well as the history and creation of these fields by early philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians like Ptolemy, Plato, Aristotle, and others who attempted to map and understand the skies above the earth and give reason and meaning to what they see when humans looked up towards the heavens and saw the stars. So here I've included some basic definitions. Astronomy is the branch of science that deals with mapping the physical universe as a whole. Astrology takes that knowledge and applies it to the practice of seeking knowledge of the future or the unknown, forecasting human and earthly events through the observation of celestial bodies. Medical astrology, another word for it being iatromathematics, takes this astrological thinking one step further, applying it to medicine through a combination of art, science, natural philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics in its practice. So, keeping all of this in mind, one of the first books in our collection I want to talk about is Margarita Philosophica, which roughly translates to Pearls of Philosophy. The work, originally printed in Germany in 1508, this is actually a reprint from 1517, was written by Gregor Reich, who was a German Carthusian monk and humanist scholar. Here we see its title page showing the work is in Latin. Most of the materials I will talk about today are in Latin. I want to preface that I do not speak Latin, but I am considering learning it now that I found myself in a historical medical library where Latin is often the primary language used. So with that being said, please excuse any poor pronunciations that I may have this evening. I will do my best. So the images on the center and the right are 2 pages from the book. One includes popular music of the time, the other teachings the basics of geometry. Considered one of the earliest printed encyclopedias of general knowledge, the book is divided into 12 chapters that discuss topics ranging from basic vocabulary, music, mathematics, and geometry to astrology and the origin and principles of nature, and is filled with charts, diagrams, and block prints. Here are 2 more images from Margarita Philosophica that are available through the Historical Medical Library's digital image library, which you can find through the collections page on the College of Physicians website. The one on the left shows Ptolemy, whom I mentioned earlier, as a founder of astronomical knowledge. Living in Alexandria, Egypt, during the 2nd century, Claudius Ptolemy was a mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, geographer, music theorist, who wrote about a dozen scientific treatises on his variety of subject matter. Here he can be seen in this block print illustration holding a quadrant, which is a tool used to measure the angles and map the stars according to their relative position from the perspective of the viewer on Earth, alongside a woman representing astronomy named Astronomia, guiding his work to his right. Ptolemy developed what was coined a geocentric model, the belief that the Earth was at the center of the universe, mapping celestial objects based on the perception of the observer at the center. So his concept mapped the universe using a celestial sphere. This is an imaginary sphere seen as consecutive rings of circles on a flat diagram in which the observer is seen at the center and on which all celestial objects are considered to lie. So here on the right, the illustration shows the human observer on Earth represented as the figure Atlas at the center, with, again, the female figure Astronomia at the top of the page. The celestial sphere is just one of many tools in the astrological toolbox, tools that evolve over time with the introduction of new knowledge meant to describe and project the paths and organization of celestial bodies and events in the sky and heavens above the Earth. Here's a book whose impact lasted centuries through its in-depth analysis into the shape and apparent movement of the Earth and other heavenly bodies. Titled Sphera, sometimes called Sphera Mundi, or Sphere of the World, the book was composed by scholar, monk, and astronomer Johannes de Sacrobosco in the 13th century. The library's copy of this book is actually a bound work of 3 books, the title page is right here, reflecting its long-lasting impact on history. The first book being a 1572 printing of Sphera. The second is titled Questiones Novae in Libellum de Sphera, or New Questions on the Booklet of the Sphere, printed in 1569, which is an in-depth discussion of the original Sphera work. And to the right, a third undated inclusion of Libellus Ioannis de Sacrobosco, which is an ecclesiastical account of his work that relates it to the Christian church. Most likely, these books were bound together after they were printed so that the owner could have a single bound comprehensive study into the astronomical work of Johannes de Sacrobosco. As I mentioned with most astrology books in our collection, Sphera is incredibly comprehensive, attempting to educate the reader on basic mathematics and geometry in order to understand the astronomical knowledge described. Although this work isn't directly related to medical astrology, without an understanding of basic astronomy, one would be a pretty poor practitioner. And the imagery and illustrations that are provided give us a really good basis in understanding the science. So here are some more images from that same text. Seen in the back left is another example of that celestial sphere model, where we can see the development of the observation of the skies with symbols and signs of the zodiac in the outer rings. The symbols in the inner rings represent the known planets, including the sun and the moon. The center illustration is another tool for our toolbox known as the armillary sphere, which is a more detailed model than the celestial sphere. Just like other geocentric models showcasing the Earth at the center, this illustration shows the rotation of the zodiac around the Earth with rings and hoops representing the equator, tropics, and other celestial body movements, like the pathways of the equinox. As a physical model, these hoops have the ability to actually revolve around the axis, so that if someone was curious as to the location of certain constellations or cosmic events, this tool could be physically manipulated to predict their location on any given date as they move around the Earth. To the right is a more detailed and in-depth armillary sphere design. This text immediately below the image translates to the third chapter of the rising and setting of the signs, of the diversity of days and nights, and of the division of climates, which describes the function of the armillary sphere in mapping the 4 regions of the Earth based on the meridian and equatorial lines. So this collection of sphere works and its related works elaborates on other astronomical knowledge, identifying the tropics and the ecliptic path, from the Latin word ecliptica and the Greek word ecliptikos. The ecliptic forms a great circle in the celestial sphere representing the sun's apparent path during the year, identifying where lunar and solar eclipses can occur, as each is affected by the position of the Earth, which you can see in the diagrams on the left. Again, reflective of the widely accepted geocentric view, the Earth is illustrated as resting in the center of the universe, with the moon and the sun circling around it. And then the page on the right discusses the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer, and the Arctic and Antarctic circles, and dictates the path of the zodiac relative to these regions on Earth as that little line around that sphere. So to better explain some of the symbols we've seen and will continue to see, I'm just going to jump to 2 19th century works just briefly so we can become a bit more familiar. This work, titled Occult Science in Medicine, is by a German doctor and theosophist, Franz Hartmann, and this book was published in 1893. In the words of his dedication, which the author ascribes to every student of medicine, he explains his reasoning for the book. In a quote attributed to Swiss physician, alchemist, and philosopher of the German Renaissance, Theophrastus Paracelsus, a man who pioneered the use of minerals and other chemicals like mercury, lead, and arsenic in medicine, whom Franz Hartmann uses as a reference throughout the book, he writes, quote, "That which is looked upon by one generation as the apex of human knowledge is often considered an absurdity by the next, and that which is regarded as a superstition in one century may form the basis of science for the following one." So we see here text describing human behavioral characteristics to the sun, moon, and planets, and their associated symbols, which we've seen in geocentric models. I added the model from Sphera in the top corner for reference. It's worth mentioning that there are only 7 planets listed, which include both the moon and the sun, called Luna and Sol, reflecting the astrological knowledge of Paracelsus. The planets were separated into benevolent, favorable, or fortunate characteristics, Jupiter, Sol, and Venus, or malevolent, unfavorable, or unlucky, Saturn, Mars, and Luna. And Mercury kind of sits in a variable position affecting the others. Published in 1889, Solar Biology here is a book written by an occultist named Hiram Erastus Butler. I'm not going to dive deep into this work. It's a book not meant for medical astrology, but there's quite a bit of reference information to astrological study. A product of his own research, Butler attempted to create a system of archetypes based on people's natal sun and moon signs, creating essentially in a simplistic form of a horoscope, which is a term I'll come back to later. I did want to, however, show the fantastic imagery on the cover of the book and a snippet that lists the signs of the zodiac. Libra represents balance, and whose sign is a scale. Scorpio has the sign of a scorpion. Sagittarius, a symbol of an arrow, and the sign of an archer. Capricorn has the sign of a goat. Aquarius, as water bearer, is often seen as a sign of a bucket of water being poured. In the illustrations, we'll see. Pisces has 2 fishes. Aries, the sign of a ram. Taurus, the sign of a bull. Gemini, a set of twins. Cancer, a crab. Leo, a lion. And Virgo, a virgin. So the signs of the zodiac are one of the most well-recognized astronomical mapping tools dating back to Babylonian astronomy during the first millennium BC. The zodiac itself consists of the 12 signs I just mentioned. The zodiac belt, the pathway of the zodiac as it moves around the Earth, extends approximately 9 degrees from the ecliptic. So shown here on the left is a circular illustration and representation of the signs of the zodiac as a radial, identifying the FE, or feminine signs, and MA, masculine signs. From a second edition of one of the earliest medical astrology texts printed in Poland from 1513, the title translates roughly to Introductory Astronomy of Krakow, Illuminated Almanac. And this work describes in depth each of the signs of the zodiac and the application of medical practices such as phlebotomy or bloodletting based on the time of year that each sign is in the skies. The author, called by several different names, but for the sake of easy pronunciation, I will refer to the name Michael Falconer, was a professor of mathematics, physics, logic, and Aristotle's philosophy at Krakow University in Poland. One of his most notable students was Nicholas Copernicus, who in the mid-16th century introduced heliocentrism, the astronomical theory that the sun rested at or near the center of the universe, with the Earth and other bodies revolving around it. Now, despite this theory, astrology remains to this day a geocentric study due to the nature of astrological reading and interpretation. Astrology makes the person, the individual on Earth, the center of the model at all times. It's from their view upon which all of astrological readings are made. So the image on the right from a first edition translated to a narrative of the elements of astrology from the year 1560 comes more teachings on the basis of astronomy and astrology attributed to Valentin Naboth, known by the Latinized name Valentinus Nabonidus. He was a German mathematician, astronomer, and astrologer. Here we see each of the symbols associated with each sign of the zodiac divided into 2 groups: imperantia, or commanding signs, and obedientia, or obedient signs. So with the inclusion of 7 planets, timing becomes more prominent with the application of medical care, determined with the diagnostic principles of astrology through the assignment of human behavioral tendencies. Depending on the day, month, or year, different planetary qualities determine different effects on an individual, with the malevolent or benevolent characteristics of the planets influencing a disease or a person in need of care. One could discern treatment based on each planet's jurisdiction at the time of an astrological reading, in combination with the behavior and influences of the signs of the zodiac as well. So here are some more illustrations from that Krakow Astronomy Almanac. Here we see an essential tool of the astrological tool belt, the birth chart, also called a nativity. Both terms are commonly used, and they both mean the picture of someone's astrological reading based on a certain date and time, specifically the date and time of their birth. A more common term would be a horoscope, derived from the Greek words aura and skopos, meaning time and observer. Given any set date, time, and location of an event, one would be able to chart the information into an easily understood, to an avid practitioner of astrology, a reading that would determine the best course of action for care. The chart identifies the location of the planets, divided into 12 sections, with each planet falling into one of the 12 signs of the zodiac. These are then divided again into 12 houses of heaven, which relay the meaning behind the planet's location, suggesting the influences of the zodiac on the specific individual in question. Houses 1 through 6, with the first called ascendant, were usually found below the horizon, and houses 7 through 12, with 7 called ascendant house, above the horizon being the horizontal plane through the eyes of the observer. If celestial bodies' locations are not entirely above or below the horizontal plane for any given reading, these can be considered cusps, which may cause one reading the horoscope to lean in one direction or another, depending on the influences of the zodiac and the planets on the chart. The illustration to the right precedes the words chapter on the division of time and shows how to display a nativity in a more simplistic and readable manner. The square, just like the circular chart on the left, is divided into 12 houses, each represented by a triangle with the perimeter containing each zodiac constellation. The words at the center translate roughly to the general mastery of the heavens in astrology, suggesting to the astrological practitioner that this is the concluding result of their knowledge, often with the date, time, and subject written in the center. With this final chart, inferences can be made as to an individual's personality, their physical traits, and all sorts of medical treatments that may be applied. So here is a Volville, one of my favorite tools in the astrological tool belt, mainly for its ingenuity and complexity. Expanding on the nativity, a Volville was a wheel or slide chart composed of paper and moving parts, and you can see in this GIF. This Volville can be found in a tract from 1563 by Veronese mathematician Giovanni Padovani that discusses both astronomy and astrology with many tables and charts to assist in calculations. The Volville is used to locate the position of the sun or moon in the zodiac, determining the best time or the worst for the treatment of medical application, down to not just the day, but the nearest hour in which medical care could be applied. So as these books were developed during the Renaissance era of Europe, known as a cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages, one can see the intersection of art, literature, and discovery in these works. Through the pages are philosophical ponderings, not only educating the reader as to what they saw in the sky, but also encouraging them to ask why, often applying Christian beliefs to their reasoning. As the question of why embedded itself into astrological knowledge and practice, more philosophical leanings were applied, including the historical teachings of Greece and Roman medicine. Teachings like the humoral theory of Hippocrates, which was introduced during the 1st century, and the theory's significant development by Claudius Galenus, often anglicized as Galen or Galen of Pergamon, into the medical field and practices of the Renaissance era. Here are portraits of these two men. Both are available on our digital image library from a book called The Surgeon's Mate, printed in 1655, which discusses the field of surgery and surgical procedures for both military and domestic applications. So Hippocrates, a foundational thinker of astronomy, was one of the pioneering minds attributing relations of the celestial bodies to the human body. Here, the image on the left is from our digital image library and is a page from the divine work of Hippocrates, a treatise attributed to him that includes chapters on the effects of the moon and each sign of the zodiac as it relates to the body, printed in 1483. As a way of mapping the zodiac to the body, the images in the center on the right show us another tool in the astrological tool belt, often referred to as the Zodiac Man. Zodiac Man's purpose, in the most general sense, is to apply each sign of the zodiac to a part of the body that is most related to and influenced by said astrological sign. The center example of Zodiac Man comes from an Italian work I will simply refer to as Fasciculis Medicinae, or a collection of medicine, created with a focus on popular medicine of the time and its application to the human body. It is a 1516 edition from Milan, based on a 1509 forgery of the 1493 Venetian work. This work, associated with an obscure author and physician named Johannes de Kethem, combines ancient medicine and medieval medical knowledge with early Renaissance medical innovations. I appreciate the image in the center from our copy of the forgery. The way in which certain signs of the zodiac are presented gives clear representation to different parts of the body. There's Pisces as a fish on either foot, Capricorn wrapped around the knees, the scales of Libra in the background representing the kidneys on either side of the body, one of each figure of Gemini touching each lung within the chest, Aries with the mind representing the mind rests on top of the head of the individual. The example of the Zodiac Man on the right comes from the first book I talked about in this presentation, the 1517 edition of Margarita Philosophica from Germany. The difference in artistic style is apparent, as well as the dissection into the body to give representation to some of the inner organs more specificity. It's hard to see the words, but some organs represented include the kidney, spleen, stomach, heart, and lungs. Along with each zodiac sign are descriptions. Cancer, for example, is followed by the phrase, Cancer itself is watery and moist, phlegmatic. Along with Taurus, the phrase translates to a hard and fierce bull, the land of melancholy. These phrases are bringing attention to the human behaviors related to each zodiac sign and reflect the development of the Greek humoral theory by Galen and the application of Galen's four temperaments to Renaissance era medical astrology practice. So the basis of the humoral theory of Hippocrates is that an individual is considered healthy when the four humors of the body are balanced. Depending on one's nativity reading, certain treatments to each humor would be executed to bring the body back into said balance. So this little book on the left is a, quote, new and complete commentaries on all Galen's books on temperaments from the year 1547, and discusses in depth Galen's theory that there are four personality types: sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. So each of these temperaments correlate to one of the humors of Greek humoral theory. The belief was that the four humors formed inside the body and the organs that were affected by a excess or lack of each, which in turn determined the person's temperament. So the balance of the four humors considered the person healthy. The humors also reflected part of the natural world, the four elements: air, fire, earth, and water, the four qualities of matter: hot, dry, wet, and cold, the four seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter, even the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west, and the four ages of man: birth, adolescence, adulthood, and old age. So Galen's four temperaments or personality types linked personality to health. Sanguine individuals, seen as optimistic and social, are influenced by their liver, which impacts the blood. In later centuries, this transitions to association with the heart. The characteristic of this personality are often seen as hot and wet, which led to suggestions like opening windows and going for walks in cool weather, as air was the element so influential to signs associated with a sanguine temperament. If a person's temperament was phlegmatic, considered even-tempered and thoughtful, they were influenced by their brain believed to produce phlegm. With the seasonal characteristics of winter, being cold and wet, suggestions of treatment with too much phlegm included the induction of vomiting or the application of a heat plaster, which is what we now commonly call a heat patch, like a thermocare patch. So, as a result of Galen's work, the signs of the zodiac were separated into four sections, delineated by their celestial hemispheres and correlated with the four elements. By correlating the movements of the celestial spheres, like time of day and year, with an individual's diet, exercise, age, or other physical factors, a determination of their health could be made, with the results reflecting where imbalances lied within the body's four humors, and medical care could be applied properly. So circling back to the tract from 1563 by Padovani that had that fun volvel that moved. Here on the left is a page that dissects each of the signs of the zodiac and assigns them to various temperaments. The top table delineates which are masculine and which are feminine, those that have fixed qualities and those whose qualities can be adjusted based on the time of year. The center text delineates each sign according to cardinal directions: Orientalia being east, Meridionalia being south, Occidentalia being west, and Septentrionalia being north. That one's a hard one. And their associated elements and seasons. The third table and the list below it organizes the signs by their degree from the horizon and, dependent on the sun or moon, how much they can be affected by treatment. As the book dives into influences of the zodiac on various parts of the human body, these tables to the right show at the top which parts of the human body are protected by which signs of the zodiac, while at the bottom, according to the signs during one's birth, which areas of the body are at risk for pain. So, with all of this knowledge combined, using all the tools in the astrological tool belt, the astrologist can go on to make predictions, assessments, and attribute the cause of one's ailments and what treatments are required in order to relieve one of their medical issues. Here we see a horoscope from Johannes Gavinet's Friend of Physicians, printed in 1496. Divided into four sections of 7 chapters each, the work casts multiple horoscopes. Just as the previous works we've talked about, the text also teaches the basic structures of the heavens, the constellations, the zodiac, and the dignities of the planets, and the application of astrology to medicine, presenting the causes of plague and death. Asked of the author by a gentleman named Henry Amicus of Brussels in 1431 to predict the outcome of the Dean of Vienne's at the time's death, this horoscope was read by Gabinet that he would indeed pass. And 2 days later, that gentleman died. There was, of course, contention of the validity of astrology and the predictions that came with horoscopes and nativities. Due to the nature of the study and understanding the heavens and predicting events as significant as someone's death, knowledge believed to be only reserved for God in Christian thinking, the ebb and flow of the inclusion and exclusion of religion permeates each of these works to a varying degree. So here, printed in London in 1647 is Christian Astrology, modestly treated in 3 books by English astrologer William Lilly. Through his work, he teaches the art of astrology, quote, instructing the student on how to judge or resolve all manner of questions contingent unto man regarding health, sickness, riches, and marriage, and the art of the use of nativity. Rather than separate Christian beliefs from the art of astrology, Christian principles and philosophy are interwoven with astrological knowledge and his various horoscopes in this work. So here, as Lilly teaches the reader on nativities, he provides a table to convert hours and minutes of time into degrees and minutes of the equator and discusses whether a reading will promote a cure or, depending on the positions of the planets, quote, there remains little hope of remedy. With all manner of questions asked, shown on the page to the right, he addresses what combination of the zodiac and planets may lead to an individual having gout in one paragraph, and then in the next discusses which astrological combinations cause someone to develop the tendency of falling off their horse, which is that of violent falls that you see there. Just for fun, here are 2 more examples from that work. The one on the left is a nativity titled A Dog Missing. Where? So this nativity is of the day and time someone's dog went missing. His astrological prediction was that the dog was not far and would be found in a day, and indeed, a neighbor located the dog by the next morning. The example on the right is a reading from the day and time someone had their fish stolen from the fisherman's warehouse, in which he postulated that they were, quote, in some moist place or in some low room, because the sun was in Cancer, a wet sign, and the moon in Taurus, an earthly sign, indicating someplace moist and close to the ground. As time went by and questions were asked of astrologers on all manners of the subject, there, of course, were those ready to monopolize on the practice to the masses, especially in the field of medicine. During the 19th and 20th centuries, medical almanacs, like this C.W. Roebuck's Astrological Almanac for 1853, were printed annually as promotional material. Charles Roebuck, seen here on the cover to the left in robes, larger than life against the people around him, was a manufacturer of patent medicines, an astrologist, a fortune teller, and a charlatan or fraud in the United States, with many of his proclamations of medical healing eventually debunked. The page in the center shows our zodiac man with the title, quote, The Anatomy of Man's Body as Governed by the 12 Constellations According to Ancient Astrology. The page on the right in the almanac, as we dive in, has an advertisement for the purchase of nativities in the top left corner, deeming them, quote, a paper which everyone should have for consultation before entering on any enterprise of hazard. And then a couple paragraphs later, addressing attacks by skeptics in the column on the right. So filling the almanac, necessary for bringing validity to C.W. Roebuck's prowess as an astrologer, are testimonials and proclamations of the virtue of his product. Recently relocated to Boston from Philadelphia, most of these reference people meeting him or sending him letters to where he practiced at the time at 71 Locust Street for 4 years. The College of Physicians of Philadelphia was also located first in our first location on Locust Street. We moved to our current location in 1908. So this guy was about 2 miles down the road. Among the testimonials in this almanac are claims of the curing of blindness, the curing of head ulcers, of heart palpitations, and even the removal of gout. And here we can see even the recovery of stolen property. So as I end the discussion today, I just wanted to share a piece of material that showcases the proliferation of medical astrology over the centuries into popular culture, coming back to my opening comments, or reflecting on the popularity of astrology today, which is what brought you all here. So thank you for listening to my presentation. All right.
That was so awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it was a bit
I
of
was just looking at that the All My Single Ladies part of the one of those last few pages you showed.
Yeah, there's a lot on marriages. The Christian astrology book also has several chapters on who I should marry, why I should marry, how many wives someone should have. So there's all manner of questions that
Yeah.
are found in some
I mean,
books.
these are still the same questions, you know, we pull tarot cards for, so you know, and it's great to see that nothing has changed. I saw someone in the chat did ask, how do you spell that dial? Vauville? Is that where you
Volville, so Volvelle,
Okay.
Volvelle. So you can actually find that on the digital image library, that GIF. We also have a digital exhibit on the library website. Like I said, if you head over to the College of Physicians and go into the collections tab, you can find library collections pages. We have numerous different websites right now. And there's a digital exhibit on medical astrology that kind of dives even deeper into some other books that I didn't even talk about today that we have. And that GIF was in there. So I really wanted to show that because it's a lot of fun. And it's actually a 2-paged part of that book. So the Volville that I showed on one side is the Volville for the reading with the sun. The other side is the Volville for the reading of the moon. And they both kind of, you know, you can twirl the paper parts really easily. And like I said, it reads down to the hour, so it's very exact if you know what you're doing when you're using it.
That's awesome. That one's from our collection as well, right?
Yes.
I,
All of the books and materials that I showed today come from the Historical Medical Library. Like I talked about, I think 12 or 11 books, but like I said, when they're all grouped into those larger sciences of like the occult, astronomy, astrology, magic, witchcraft, alchemy, we have dozens upon dozens of books related to that. And if you search the library catalog, you can find a lot of them. And if you want to do research, like I said, you can reach out to library@collegeofphysicians.org. If you have something in particular you wanted to look at or would like to dive into, we can help you with that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I dropped some of those links in the chat for anyone interested. So
Excellent.
definitely go explore those. We do have a couple questions. Also, if anyone else has any questions they want to ask Candace, please drop them in the chat. We got Maya here asking, how did the Catholic Church view the use of astrology in treating illness? I don't know if you can speak to that, but
I can speak a little bit. I know I briefly mentioned it in my work because I focused more on the books themselves and talking about this since I'm not a historian, I'm just a librarian. But there is kind of interwoven, I know you said Catholic Church, but there is woven a lot of Christianity in these texts, being the Renaissance era. And it is this kind of give and take where when you're talking about the heavens, which are seen as the world of God or of the gods, there's this give and take in terms of the amount of information and knowledge one can glean, and whether that knowledge is coming from a knowledge of the sciences or whether it is a gift of God itself. And in some of these books too, these practitioners and the people who are writing them either have the intention of heading towards the knowledge of God or recognizing that one could never know the knowledge of God. And this is just what we can know as man here on earth. So there's some really interesting interplay. And I do see a comment here, Ty mentioning that some of these were banned. We did just recently have a talk on banned books, and some of these books themselves do have some edits in them where there was a bit of censorship in terms of either the authors that were writing them or certain contents of the book. So not as much as I would expect, but there was one book that did even have some pages cut out of it and permanently removed from the binding.
yeah,
I did
that
also,
doesn't make sense.
I did see one person asking if there were translations of these books. There are digitized versions of these books. You can often find Google Books is a great option for seeing digitized free copies. Not all of them, because some of them are rare, but different libraries may have them digitized. But as for translation, this was me working with Google Translate and some research into traditional Latin to try and figure out some key phrases and being able to read them in the text and interpret what it was actually trying to say. because sometimes the text gets a little smudged or faded. So I do not know if there's translations out there that would require somebody going and doing it, but I tried to get as much content information as I could in reading certain headings and recognizing images that I knew would be relevant to the conversation we're having today.
Yeah, that banned books talk, I feel like there's a lot of bases that y'all sort of both touched on. I don't know if anyone got a chance to tune into that one earlier last week, but it was also really informative. We have some other questions. Let me see. Do any of your sources also discuss the use of geomancy in conjunction with astrology to diagnose or treat medical conditions?
I cannot say yes or no. I didn't get to dive that deep into it, but the chances are pretty high in terms of just the volume of works that we have. And I do have to preface too that a lot of the works that I talked about today, a lot of them were from the 16th century, but anything that is from the 15th century or earlier, a lot of them are considered our incunabula, or books printed before the year 1500. And a lot of those we have in offsite storage for safekeeping and proper care. So these incunabula that we have, I can't easily get my hands on. So I was looking at a lot of the digitized images that we have there, so I couldn't peek into all of the pages. So that's why I can't say for sure yes or no, because I didn't get to deep dive. And like I said, you could spend hundreds of hours looking at all of these different subjects from the library.
No, for sure. All right, we got this other one. This one's really interesting, actually. So, how prevalent would the use of medical astrology would have been during its peak? And was it something that was normal or considered alternative?
I would say it was more of a normal practice in the sense that, especially during the Renaissance era, there was a lot of discovery of medicine and science. And so along with that discovery, it was a lot of interpretation, like I mentioned, going back to older knowledge on science, on medicine, on astronomy, and trying to apply that to medical care, because it was still a very much not, I would say, new practice, but medicine then certainly was not the medicine that we have today, 600 years later, 500 years later. So it was not surprising or unusual if a medical practitioner chose to include astrology in the way that they applied their medicine. As you can see by the proliferation of these texts in our library, they're here because our library collected, like I said, for over 200 years, all sorts of books related to medicine. And so that's why these are in our collections. And again, why they're so comprehensive, why I had to kind of teach you guys a little bit of astronomy at the beginning, and you saw some geometry. There's a lot more pages on mathematics. I didn't want to get too deep in it, but it really tries to give whoever owns the book or is working with the book a complete and comprehensive study. They're teaching tools. And so it definitely would have been something, had somebody thought about using it as a medical practitioner, it would be something that they would be very serious about applying to their work.
Cool, cool. I actually had a question, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but a lot of those images of the Zodiac man and all of those, I love his weird facial expressions and all of that. Do you know, like, are those like what kind of printing processes like were used for those? Are those like etchings or like lithographs?
I believe a lot of the ones that I showed were woodblock prints.
Okay.
Just based on the time period. So there was a lot of woodblock printing happening, but it depends also on the later publication, how they might have transitioned from there, if they were engraved or what.
Yeah. They fit so many of those like different animals and characters.
I know. And
They really,
every single one is very unique and very different. And you can see the person's artistic talents. Or
yeah.
I mentioned one of those was a copy of a forgery of the original. The original is wildly different in artistic talent than the forgery images that we have. So, you know, there's a lot of pagination too. There's a lot of handwritten notes in the pages, on the sides of the pages, in the margins. There's a lot of marginalia. There's a lot of people writing in their own tables. And I meant to show it in this and I forgot, but I did come across in one of our books, somebody had a little card that they had written out their own astrology reading and stuck in the book for later reference. Whoa. Yeah, it was Christmas Day. I want to say it was from the 19th century, but that was like a fun little find that somebody had.
Do you remember what their reading was by chance or no?
I do not. I could not tell you. It was very in detailed, and I will say I am not a avid practitioner of astrology by any sense, so I certainly learned a lot for today.
I love it. It's like a pre-CoStar era. Just write your own
Yeah.
in your little
Yeah.
book. So I think we should close out with this one. So where does the study of medical astrology stand today? Is anyone still practicing astrology for specifically medical purposes?
I can't say that I know for sure just how much it proliferates. I mean, we certainly can say based on if we follow like astrology accounts on social media, or if we like go in and do our little horoscopes on different apps, or this knowledge that we have nowadays, you can certainly see some of these practices like the humoral theory, especially when you get into the seasons and hot and dry, cold and wet. Oh, great. Somebody here in the chat says they own a modern book on medical astrology. So, again, being a special collections librarian, I was diving deep into our old works. So, yes, there is a lot of newer stuff out there as well, but you can kind of see the proliferation of the concepts of human behaviors attributed to the planets and to the signs of the zodiac as a means to kind of merge the human body and the thinking of the human body with an interpretation of the examination of the skies, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I think someone asked what the title is. Okay, there we go. Body Astrology by Claire Gallagher.
There you go. There
Have
you
to
go.
look into it. A little deep dive. Well, Candace, thank you so much.
Of
This was
course. Thank you for
awesome.
having me.
Yeah, let's do it again sometime. And
Yeah,
thank you
definitely.
everyone for tuning in. We try to have some more of these virtual events so folks around the country, around the world can tune in and hear about our collection. I always love plugging the library. Definitely go check it out if you're local.
Yes.
On weekends, they're open. And thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Cheers.
Cheers.